Hello, and welcome to BizRun. This video is the 8th video in a series called Leave and Time Off Management, where we will give you an in-depth view of the module and instruction in BizRun. We encourage you to watch all the videos in order, then go back and rewatch and use as reference the videos that apply to your organization. In this particular video, we're going to continue spending more time in the Personal Info Time Off Accrual tab for you to gain a solid understanding of how to add and edit accrual entries yourself and the different options that you could consider adding to your entries that may enhance your organization's leave and time off policy and needs. So let's start. If you recall the fictional character Nancy from our last video, she was a long-term employee who has been earning paid time off using the hours earned per hour worked accrual type. Let's take a closer look at Nancy's accrual entries so we can make sure they make sense from a PTO policy standpoint. And if they don't, explore options that might enhance the policy to make more sense. Here are her accrual entries again. Assuming she works the typical 20-80 hours per year, which again is 8 hours per day for 40 hours a week for all 52 weeks of the year, she would have been accruing about 40 hours of paid time off in any given year since January 1st, 2005 until January 1st, 2021. Given that she only has one starting balance entry of 0 hours effective January 1st, 2005, no time off type settings for paid time off for maximum rollover or use it or lose it clauses, and if she didn't take any time off, she would have had the potential to accrue an exorbitant amount of time off hours since 2005. Let's run a balance report for January 1st, 2020 to see how many paid time off hours she accrued to that date and had remaining. Again, assuming she didn't take any time off at all. The balance report shows a day-end balance of 638.457 hours that day. That's almost 16 weeks of paid time off that she had continuously accrued over the course of 15 years. That's a lot of hours. And it probably isn't the intention of the organization's PTO policy, even for long-term or tenured employees, to have that many unused accrued hours at any point in time. So, that leads us into the next topic of accrual entry options. The different accrual entry options currently available in BizRun are the following: max cap balance, max accrual, and waiting period. These options can be found and set on the actual accrual entries themselves. For example, let's look closer at the January 1st, 2005 entry for hours earned per hour worked by clicking on the edit or pencil icon. When you do, you'll see these three options below the hours field. These options are only available for the hours earned per hour worked accrual type, as well as the rate hours per year accrual type. If your accrual entry is for a balance or adjustment, those options are not available. So they won't display when those accrual types are selected for your entry. Let's edit this entry by selecting the Enable Max Cap Balance option, so we can get an idea of how that option works. For more information on any of these options, you can click the eye or info icon next to the field. By enabling this option, it basically allows you to specify a value for a calculated balance that would be considered a cap that this person is able to earn or accrue. Once this amount is earned, the person stops earning or accruing time off until their balance falls below the value specified. In other words, the person would need to take time off once they reach that maximum balance amount in order to continue accruing more time off. So, as an example, let's specify 160 hours as the max cap balance. Again, once Nancy accrues or earns 160 hours based on the amount of hours she worked, she will no longer be able to accrue additional time off hours until she takes time off. Let's click Submit. Notice the entry now has 160 in the max cap balance column for that particular accrual entry. Now let's run the balance report for January 1st, 2020 to see how many paid time off hours she accrued to that date after we had made that change. Notice her day end balance for that date is 160 hours. So she has reached that cap or maximum balance at some point in time on or before those dates and can no longer earn time off. Again, in order for her to continue earning time off, she would have to take time off. To simulate this, as an administrator, let's enter time off for Nancy on Thursday, January 2nd, 2020, and Friday, January 3rd, 2020, of 8 hours each day. That's a total of 16 hours. Now when we run the balance report, and this time for January 2nd, 2020, you'll notice that the day-end balance is now 152 hours. That's 8 hours less than 160 that was showing before, since she took that Thursday off. If we run the balance report for January 3rd, 2020, you'll notice that the day-end balance is now 144 hours. That's another 8 hours subtracted, accounting for Nancy's taking off on the 3rd. If we run the balance report for January 6th, the day-end balance that shows is 144 still. She didn't work over the weekend. If we now add a timekeeping entry of 8 hours for January 6th and run the balance report again, we'll see that the day-end balance increased from 144 to 144.152. The difference is essentially the time off Nancy earned for working the 8 hours. That's 8 times 0.019 equals 0.152. This means that Nancy had begun earning time off again based on the amount of hours she worked, as her time off balance was less than the maximum of 160 hours. So that's an example of the max cap balance option for time off accrual entries. This one in particular is designed and used for organizations that encourage their employees to regularly use their hard-earned time off. Now, let's take a look at the next accrual entry option called Max Accrual. By enabling the Max Accrual option, it basically allows you to specify a value for a calculated balance that would be considered an absolute maximum amount of hours that this person is able to earn in a calendar year. Once this amount is earned, the person stops earning or accruing additional time off until January 1st of the following year. In other words, even if the person takes time off, once they reach that maximum accrual amount, they will not continue accruing more time off until the following year. That maximum accrued amount of hours is the absolute maximum the person can earn and take time off during that year. So, to get an idea of how this option works, for Nancy's example, let's remove or disable the max cap balance for Nancy. Then instead, specify 160 hours as the max accrual for the January 1st, 2005 paid time off accrual entry. Again, once Nancy accrues or earns 160 hours, based on the amount of hours she worked, she will no longer be able to accrue additional time off, even if she takes time off for that year. Let's click Submit. Notice, the entry now has 160 hours in the max accrual column instead of the max cap balance column for that particular accrual entry. Now, let's run the balance report for January 1st, 2020 like we did before, and we'll see that her day-end balance for that date is 160 hours. Once again, Nancy may have earned those hours long before this date, but for the purpose of this demonstration, let's pretend she just reached that accrual amount on that day. If we use the time off entries from our previous example, Nancy took off on January 2nd and January 3rd, totaling 16 hours. When we run the balance report for January 2nd, 2020, you'll notice that the day-end balance is now 152 hours. That's 8 hours less than 160 that was showing before, since she took that Thursday off. When we run the balance report for January 3rd, 2020, you'll notice that the day-end balance is now 144 hours. That's another 8 hours subtracted, accounting for Nancy's taking time off on the 3rd. So far, the calculated balances for these days have been the same as the balances calculated using the max cap balance option in the previous example. Now, if we run the balance report for January 6th of 2020, remember, Nancy went back to work on Monday the 6th for 8 hours. This is where we'll see the difference in how the max accrual calculates the day-end balance. The day-end balance for January 6th still shows 144 hours of paid time off. She didn't earn or accrue additional time off for working the 8 hours on the 6th. Let's fast forward from this point in time to the end of 2020, when she worked 32 hours on the days leading up to the new year. And let's say she did take additional time off during 2020. In fact, she took all the 144 hours of time off, bringing her calculated balance for paid time off down to 0. Even if we ran the balance report on the days she worked in December, her calculated day-end balance on each of these days still remained at 0. Again, with the max accrual option set, Nancy stopped accruing time off once she hit the maximum amount of 160 hours. She doesn't start accruing again until January 1st the following year, or technically January 4th, 2021, which is the day she starts working again after the New Year's holiday. So that's an example of the max accrual option for time off accrual entries. This one in particular is designed and used by organizations that limits the amount of time off their employees can earn and even take in a given year. Finally, let's look at the waiting period option for time off accrual entries. This option is used in organizations that have a probationary or a waiting period that a new employee must pass before they can use the time off hours they accrue. This option is only available for the hours earned per hour worked accrual type, as well as the rate hours per year accrual type. Furthermore, this option is typically only used on the first time off accrual entry in a person's time off accrual tab or record. To get an idea of how this option works, let's go through John's profile through the Launchpad. John is a new employee and hasn't been placed or moved to a position in the org chart yet. So, to access his personal info in time off accrual tab, an admin would need to go through the Launchpad, click on his name, which redirects to John's personal info, then time off accrual. John doesn't have any time off accrual entries yet, so in this example, we'll show you how to add accrual entries on your own. To add a new accrual entry, click the Add New button. From here, select the effective date. Let's select January 1st, 2021 for this example, but you would normally select the new hire's service start date for the first accrual entry. For time off type, let's select vacation. For accrual type, we'll select the simple rate, hours per year type. And for hours, let's say 80 hours per year. And for now, let's leave it at that and click submit. Now, let's add another accrual entry with an effective date of 1/1/21 and a balance of 0 hours for vacation as a starting point or starting balance. If you recall from previous videos, for the sake of good practice, we highly recommend adding this starting balance when using rate or hours earned per hour worked accrual types. Let's run a balance report for John to get a baseline for comparison, and let's run it for January 30th, 2021. Based on the accrual rate of 80 hours per year, John would have already accrued 6.575 hours by January 30th, 2021. Let's run it again, this time for January 31st, 2021. It shows he would have accrued 6.795 hours by January 31st, 2021. Now, let's go back to John's accrual entry for rate and edit it by specifying a waiting period of 30 days. Then click Submit. If we run the balance report again for January 30th, with the waiting period option enabled, it now shows John's day-end balance of 0 hours for vacation. If we run the balance report again for January 31st, given the waiting period or probationary period of 30 days has passed by this date, his day-end balance shows the 6.795 hours. John did not lose any time during the first 30 days of his employment, which was considered his probationary or waiting period. He was still accruing time off based on the rate of 80 hours per year. However, those hours didn't show up in his calculated balance during the waiting period, so they technically and visibly were not available for him to use for time off. So that's an example of adding a time off accrual entry and using the waiting period option for a new hired employee. This option can be used if your organization has a probationary or waiting period associated with your PTO policy, only allowing new employees to take time off after that period has passed. And that's how you add time off accrual entries along with some options that can enhance your PTO policy in BizRun. Be sure to check out our next video where we will wrap up the Leave and Time Off Management instructional series and take a look at yet another report that you could run that provides information that will help you and your people make important decisions and manage leave and time off more effectively in BizRun. Hope this helps. Thank you for watching.